After binding the system, shuttling through different thrilling worlds, evil ghosts/monsters/gods open their bloodshot eyes, and no one survives wherever they go. Zhao Yutang must strive to survive in each desperate situation, and survival is her only goal. In the ancient house, an evil god descended and pulled her into the deep well. I allow you to be my servant, and you will always follow me, rely on me, and accept my blessings. Zhao Yutang raised his eyebrows and smiled, without hesitation, cutting off the bonds between the two of them. No, he said, if I want to do it, I will be your shackles. In the Deep Sea Devouring, the monster came with a severed and terrifying soul, dragging her into the abyss of the sea. The end of humanity is approaching, those who believe in me will have eternal life, stay behind. Zhao Yutang clenched the handle of the knife and said, I want to live as a human, and as a monster, I will never be myself again. To keep me, you only have the choice of integrating into humanity. If I want to do it, I will set a standard for your social behavior. You will restrain your instincts and prioritize me. I am willing to be Zhao Yutang's lover. I promise that I will restrain my instincts, offer up my soul, take her joy for joy, and take her evil for evil. I am willing to be his lover, and I promise to give him my purest love in complete freedom. Keywords of the novel. No pop-ups allowed in thrillers, no downloading of complete episodes of Heartbeat in thrillers, no reading of the latest chapters of Heartbeat in thrillers. Chapter 1. Happy Birthday, 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 2. Happy Birthday, 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Happy Birthday, 2. How old are you? How come you live in such an old neighborhood? Lu Yuyu had long been indifferent to the fact that the two of them shared a house and then became three. She stared closely at Xin Rant's snow-white profile, amazed by the beauty of the young man countless times, and her mind became lively. She had seen such a beautiful boy for the first time, and he looked very innocent and easy to deceive. It would be great if he had been her boyfriend. There were many things piled up in the cramped living room, and Xin Ran lazily leaned against the cabinet. Her face still wore a seductive smile, but the curve at the end of her eyes was cold and stiff, and her eyeballs landed on Zhao Yutang with a good twist. He completely ignored Lu Yuyu's approach and asked curiously like a child, what is hanging on your backpack? That is a blue plush doll, made of poor quality, but carrying the annoying odor that he is extremely familiar with. He treated the doll like an enemy invading his own territory, his cold gaze seeming to tear it apart out of thin air. The young man was so beautiful that he didn't look like a real person. In this thrilling world, beauty almost meant some kind of danger. Zhao Yutang tried not to align his gaze with him and only lowered his head when he heard the sound. Doll pendant, he said. This is certainly not an ordinary doll pendant, the system is temporarily parasitic inside. According to its words, if the home range of a thriller movie is small, the interference factor will be strong. If it does not detach a part of itself from Zhao Yutang and integrate into this world, it is very likely to lose contact with her midway. That low-quality doll has twisted facial features and a gloomy aura under the incandescent light. Lu Yuyu looked away with disdain after just one glance, while Xin Ran seemed to be very interested in asking questions. His voice was ethereal, and his words were all about dolls. Zhao Yutang keenly sensed the ill meaning in his gaze, feeling strange and uneasy. This is just a very ordinary doll, why is he so interested in it? The only unusual thing about it is the system. Zhao Yutang quickly cut off his thoughts and looked up with a tingling gaze. Do you like this doll? She chatted as naturally as usual and said, I bought it at a street stall and I quite like it, but it's a bit shabby and many people have it. Xin Ran tugged at the corner of his lips with profound meaning, many people have it. Zhao Yutang nodded and said, yes. She was calm in her emotions, not trembling at the mention of dolls like the previous person, and her words were not clear, but Xin Ran didn't believe her words. That doll has a unique aura, and he has not yet encountered a second thing that disgusts him so much. The previous few people carried this aura and wreaked havoc here. Before the first night had passed, they wanted to run out, and in his eyes, it was like rushing to die. Thinking of these, the young man even suppressed his smile, his gaze like a sword, pulling at Zhao Yutang's exposed skin. This undisguised killing intent, even if it only lasted for a moment, was detected by her, and he couldn't help but pinch his palm, asking himself not to lose his composure. "Auntie." The landlord returned, and Lu Yuyu quickly welcomed him and complained, "Auntie, how did you come back? I want to talk to you about the rent. This is a 3-bedroom apartment, and it is said that the landlord's aunt lives alone, so she has found someone to share it with." She was around 50 years old, with a heavy makeup that couldn't hide her fatigue. As soon as she entered, she lowered her head, as if afraid of seeing anything in the living room. She hurriedly carried a bag into the kitchen, her voice stiff, "It's all right, it's all right." She pointed across the street and said, "You stay in that room." Lu Yuyu saw that she spoke so well and was in a good mood, so he didn't bother any more and entered the room with Zhao Yutang. The door closed, creating a relatively enclosed space. Zhao Yutang pinched the doll pendant with a cold expression. "He found you. The system lacks confidence, so he shouldn't know about me." Zhao Yutang's eyes showed a hint of mockery. "He may not know your identity, but he must know your existence. That's why I had an unusual interest in that doll, which led to a strong desire for destruction towards her. This greatly increases the difficulty of her survival here." Zhao Yutang did not conceal his anger. "You should know this is unfair to me. If you want me to survive, tell me everything. She cannot passively wait for death. The system compromised, and this small world fell into a cycle of death, but only 2 tenants were included each time. If the system did not intervene, it would be difficult for anyone to survive from here, so she wasn't the first host to enter here. No wonder Xin Ran had such strong hostility when he saw her. He regarded her as a provocation to invade the territory. What did you ask them to do? Perform escape missions using any method? It can be imagined that those people would do such absurd things in panic. Why are you daydreaming again?" Lu Yuyu noticed that her colleague was not in the right state, but she didn't take it to heart either. There were 2 single beds in this room, and she took the lead in grabbing the one that looked newer. "Yutang, please sleep on that bed. These 2 beds look a bit old, just like this community, they are old and outdated. The rooms are damp, and there is a smell of rotting that makes hair stand on end." Lu Yuyu muttered a few words but didn't pay much attention, but Zhao Yutang, who knew this was the home ground of thrillers, couldn't help but pay attention to the source of this rotten smell and began to search around. Xin Ran has already become suspicious of her. If she wants to survive here, she must quickly figure out what happened in this house. "What are you looking at?" Zhao Yutang closed the wardrobe, pretended not to see the suspected bloodstains inside, shook his head, and said, "Just take a look." Xin Ran stood at the door, looking young but tall and slender, almost completely blocking the narrow doorway. Perhaps because the bedroom was dimly lit, his eyebrows and eyes were blurry, and his pitch-black pupils seemed to fill his eyes. He stared at Zhao Yutang with his almost completely black pupils, his voice lowered, "Don't tamper with things here." Before he could finish speaking, the light bulb hanging above his head pricked a few times, unable to extinguish. It was unclear if it was Zhao Yutang's illusion, and the putrid smell in his nose became even stronger. Duh. Zhao Yutang turned on the bedside lamp, and the darkness receded like a tide. She lifted her face slightly and, for the first time, met Xin Ran's eyes without hesitation. The pupils and eyes were both white, with beautifully shaped eyes that seemed just an illusion under dim light. Xin Ran blinked and her curled long eyelashes trembled, as if she hadn't noticed her purpose. She just hesitated and said, "The lights here are not very good." Zhao Yutang didn't answer his words, but said, "Why can't I move? I need to stay here for a while, this place is temporarily mine." "Stay for a while." Upon hearing her say this, Xin Ran's expression became strange. None of the people who came before her had such thoughts. They were all focused on leaving as soon as possible, smashing doors, breaking windows, and jumping off buildings. It can be said that they did everything in their power. He suddenly wanted to see what she was going to do next. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Happy Birthday, 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Happy Birthday, 3. What are you secretly chatting about? Lu Yuyu came in from outside, vigilantly watching Zhao Yutang and interrupting their conversation. It's nothing. Zhao Yutang lowered his head to pack his things and didn't repeat his question, as if she had just casually asked and didn't really want to know the answer. Xin Ran didn't leave either. He had already noticed that the person who came this time was different from before and was particularly interested in her. He lazily sat on the single bed assigned to Zhao Yutang, his gaze moving with her. The original owner didn't have much, so Zhao Yutang took out his toiletries. When he bent down, the broken hair in his ear fell off and swayed in the air a few times, revealing the outline of the small earlobe in his hair. Xin Ran suddenly squinted her eyes and keenly caught the small dark mark behind her ear. When she tried to look closely again, the mark was blocked by her hair. He licked the tiger's teeth and felt quite unhappy, wanting to hold her down hard and see enough of the suspected birthmark mark. When he thought this way, Zhao Yutang suddenly looked up and the young man raised his eyebrows openly. Your hair looks better tied up. Zhao Yutang furrowed his hair and covered the area behind his ears tightly. I like to wear it, he said. She pulled out the laundry and said, I need to take a shower. Xin Ran said, oh, and politely avoided, still reminding, wash it quickly, dinner is almost ready. The bathroom was very small, and Zhao Yutang stood under the shower head, looking at the steamy mirror behind his eyes and ears. There was a crescent-shaped dark red birthmark, very small, which she had carried since birth. Unexpectedly, it was still there. Kind reminder. The host's task time is limited, so it is important to evacuate in a timely manner to protect oneself. The water temperature suddenly cooled down, and the bathtub bully let out a piercing sound. Zhao Yutang closed his eyes and let out a light sigh. The bathroom is indeed the hardest hit area for thrillers. She slowly opened her eyes and reached out to touch the shower switch, but her hand slipped into a wet ball of hair. It felt sticky to the touch, and the foul smell rushed into her nose. Zhao Yutang tightly pursed his lips, controlling his thoughts not to diverge in a terrifying direction. He forcefully pulled his hand out of his hair, wrapped it in a bathrobe, and walked out. As I turned around, I met the mirror and saw a blurry silhouette of a human figure. I couldn't see clearly, but my facial features became clearer and clearer. It's her own face. Zhao Yutang's eyes froze, his lips twitched and he wanted to say something, but his mouth gushed out a large amount of wet mud. The mud spewed out more and more, suddenly filling the entire mirror before overflowing, and the bathroom floor began to be covered with wet mud. At the same time, Zhao Yutang felt a lack of breath. Her mouth and nose seemed to be covered in wet mud in the mirror. The increasing suffocation made her face turn red, and she realized that she would suffocate to death in just a few minutes if she continued like this. She has only been in this world for a few hours and has not seen the sunrise again. She must not die in this way. Bang! The bathroom door was knocked open, and Zhao Yutang fell to the ground due to exhaustion. Cold droplets of water dripped from her hair, stimulating her nerves one after another. She gasped heavily, her eyes filled with water, and the experience of dying made her almost unable to think. The suffocation still lingered with her. What's wrong with you? The voice of the young man's concern sounded, and Xin Ran sat on the single bed, as if he had never left from here. He had a tense and worried expression, but his pitch-black pupils remained motionless, harboring deep malice, admiring her as her calmness was shattered. Zhao Yutang turned to look at the bathroom, which was clean and empty. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Happy Birthday, 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Happy Birthday, for Xian Ran sat in a relaxed posture, his body leaning forward in the direction of Zhao Yutang, making a concerned posture, but the malice and schadenfreude in his eyes were not much concealed. This move has been used many times, and those invaders who have not yet entered the situation will crazily search for ways to escape after this, which is full of ugliness. He observed with great interest the girl's face, which was almost suffocated and flushed, because she had been too flustered just now. Her bathrobe had loosened slightly, and a large area of snow-white skin caught his eye. However, her wet hair was still firmly blocked behind his ears, like a knight defending a castle. Xian Ran's eyes showed a hint of regret, but it's okay. He still had the girl's frightened expression to appreciate. He maliciously thought and raised his gaze. At this glance, he couldn't help but be stunned. The girl tilted her face slightly, with a few strands of hair sticking to her forehead. She bent her eyes and was actually smiling. The blush on her cheeks had not faded, and her eyes were still filled with water. This smile diluted her gentle temperament a bit, and a hint of brilliance was drawn from the curved smile at the end of her eyes. Zhao Yutang smiled lightly, smoothed out his scattered hair, casually pricked it, and the skin behind his ears was completely exposed to the air. Xian Ran almost unconsciously cast his gaze over, clearly seeing the dark red mark. The shape of a crescent moon. Didn't you go out? Why are you still here? Xian Ran's attention was focused on the small crescent birthmark, lying casually. Come and take a look when I hear you scream. I saw something very scary. It seemed like he remembered the purpose of his prank this time, and Xian Ran finally pulled his attention back. His expression was startled, with just the right amount of doubt. What scary thing? At this moment, Lu Yuyu also walked back. She had just been communicating with the landlord aunt, but the other party only focused on cooking and didn't say anything, which made her angry. Now she saw Zhao Yutang and Xian Ran, who were disheveled, and their anger grew even stronger. What's scary? Do you still need Xian Ran to come into the bathroom and show you something? She had a strange aura, thinking that Zhao Yutang was quite cunning in trying to strike up a conversation with Xian Ran. Zhao Yutang ignored her, but Xian Ran felt that she was in the way and frowned in disgust. He stared at Zhao Yutang, waiting for her to finish speaking the rest. These intruders only have a rough understanding of the danger here, but are not sure what will happen. At this moment, she will panic and cannot distinguish between reality and illusion. If this hallucination occurs a few more times, her mind will completely collapse, just like those people before. Zhao Yutang seemed hesitant and hesitated. Forget it, I must have misread. I've been under a lot of pressure lately, maybe I've had hallucinations. She gave herself a reason and then regained her composure, not being troubled for long. Xian Ran. His beautiful long eyebrows furrowed even more fiercely. Lu Yuyu didn't want to listen to them chatting. Upon hearing this, he quickly kicked Xian Ran out and said, Hey, I also need to take a shower. You go out first, let's meet later for dinner. As soon as Xian Ran left, she began to question Zhao Yutang, Are you interested in Xian Ran? Zhao Yutang's wet hair felt uncomfortable when tied up. He spread his long hair and began patiently wringing it dry with a towel. His eyebrows and eyes were quiet and delicate, and his voice was as calm as ever. No. She lifted her head, her almond eyes slightly round, and the deliberately maintained water light had long been wiped clean, revealing a faint cold color. You'd better not do it either. Xian Ran is the key to this deadlock, and it is obvious that the closer you get to him, the more dangerous it becomes. She wasn't kind-hearted enough to save Lu Yuyu's life, but if she didn't even have Lu Yuyu, wouldn't Xian Ran have targeted her even more? Lu Yuyu sneered and said, I want you to take care of me. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Happy Birthday, 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Happy Birthday, 5. At the table, 3 people sat in rows. The landlady's aunt, He Hongmei, served the dishes and said, sweet and sour fillet, twice cooked pork, shredded pork with fish flavor. Surprisingly, there was a table full of meat dishes, and Lu Yuyu was pleasantly surprised. He started using his chopsticks first, but was knocked down hard halfway through the dish. She was stunned and met the cold gaze of He Hongmei, who glared at her and turned to the empty seat next to her. Her tone was unprecedented kindness. Come on, let's eat first, soldiers. Lu Yuyu showed a frightened expression, somewhat bewildered. Is this woman crazy? Just as she was hesitating whether to leave quickly tonight, Zhao Yutang spoke calmly, who is the soldier? All three of them turned their gaze towards her, with Xian Ran propping up his face and his eyes dim under his long eyelashes. She was too calm and meticulous, and from the moment she came in, she didn't focus on which places could become escape routes. Instead, she was very interested in this house and He Hongmei. He Hongmei's expression was stiff, and sometimes her tone couldn't even keep up with her movements, giving her a sense of disharmony. She anxiously moved her seat and said with great kindness, it's my son. He likes to eat these dishes, so he needs to eat them first. After pausing for a few seconds, she leaned to her side as if listening to the other person's speech, and then sighed, all right, my son said he doesn't have an appetite tonight. You guys can eat. This action scared Lu Yuyu to the point where her hair stood on end. After she left, she couldn't wait to ask, is she crazy? How could she live with a lunatic? Xian Ran suddenly chuckled lightly and nodded in agreement, he is indeed a lunatic. If it weren't for a madman, who would have imprisoned their biological son for decades, he changed his tone and said, but it could also be just a poor person who has lost his son. Lu Yuyu has already calculated her savings in a few seconds. She came to rent this house because she didn't have money. At this moment, let alone the landlord being crazy, even if the landlord is a ghost, she can't leave. In order to step down for herself, she agreed with Xian Ran's words, that's right, just a poor person. Forget it, there are 3 of them. Are you afraid that a crazy woman won't succeed? After speaking, she took a deep breath and quickly put the meat into the bowl, eating it happily. Zhao Yutang ate quietly and rarely ate vegetables. After finishing his meal, he returned to his room. She didn't take Xian Ran's threat seriously, and as soon as she entered the room, she continued to rummage through boxes and cabinets searching for clues. Sure enough, at the bottom of the wardrobe, she saw a photo with a living room in the background. The photo showed the landlord's family of 3, but her son's position was torn off diagonally from top to bottom, leaving only half of her body visible. This photo is clearly rectangular, with He Hongmei and her husband standing relatively close to the side. If it's not unintentional, there should be 2 people on the opposite side. Who else is there besides He Hongmei's son? Flame. What role did he play here? Lu Yuyu lay in bed and said, how did He Hongmei's son die? He didn't die in this room, did he? She felt a chill and said, no wonder the rent is so cheap. It turned out to be a ghost house. Zhao Yutang held the photo and whispered, where's her husband? Lu Yuyu thought she was talking to him and casually said, maybe she's also dead. After speaking, seeing Zhao Yutang looking at him directly, feeling a bit uneasy, what? Zhao Yutang put away the photo and said, it's very likely. It is very likely that only He Hongmei is left in this photo. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Happy Birthday, 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Happy Birthday, 6. The circuit condition of the old community is not very good, and sometimes the network cannot be connected. Lu Yuyu rose and began to watch the TV series he downloaded in advance. Halfway through, she suddenly paused and said, did you hear any strange sounds? Of course Zhao Yutang heard it, but at first she ignored it and shook her head. No, she said. Lu Yuyu's face showed suspicion, and he didn't want to move but was curious about the source of the sound. The sound seems to be coming from under your bed, go take a look. She said so, but Zhao Yutang didn't refuse. She grabbed the edge of the bed and looked down. The floor of the single bed was a thin layer of wood, and a blue broken hand climbed up there, seemingly catching her gaze. Suddenly, she rushed over. Zhao Yutang quickly withdrew, and the smell of decay lingered, which made her complexion not very attractive. Lu Yuyu curiously asked, "What's going on?" "There's nothing." Zhao Yutang said calmly, "If you don't believe it, you can take a look." Lu Yuyu always felt that things were not so simple, but her instinct made her instinctively shake her head and say, "I won't look anymore." She quickly forgot about this episode and continued to immerse herself in the bloody plot of the TV series. But things didn't end. Next, Zhao Yutang saw the broken hand again in the restroom. The faucet was bleeding, the towel he wiped his hand turned into a ball of black hair, and the touch of the sheets felt like cold corpse skin. She came to the kitchen to boil hot water, and Xin Ren emerged from somewhere. She looked at her with interest and said, "You don't look very good." Anyone who sees those disgusting things will not look good on their faces, but Zhao Yutang's emotions are calm and there are no signs of collapse. This surprised and puzzled Xin Ren. No one who used to be caught up in this cycle did not go crazy, even though they knew it was all an illusion, their spirit would still disintegrate in such endless torment. In the event of a mental breakdown, the desire to escape becomes even more intense, and they will engage in reckless behavior and desperately attempt to escape. Especially for invaders like her, perhaps they thought they could have some reliance, but all hope was shattered by reality. They are more likely to lose control than those who are unaware of the situation. The water temperature quickly rose, and at the moment it boiled, the hot kettle made a jingling vibration. Zhao Yutang found a cup to fetch water and said lightly, "I saw some illusions again." Xin Ren stared at her with good eyes, trying to see any signs of concealment on her face, but unfortunately there was none, not at all. "Aren't you afraid?" Zhao Yutang jokingly said, "I'm almost becoming a lunatic shrouded in hallucinations." "Aren't you the ones to be afraid of?" Xin Ren was dumbfounded. Is this a new type of camouflage strategy? Or is it true that she was not informed of the situation? No, it's impossible. He is getting more and more curious about what she will do. What is her purpose? If it's just to escape here, why did you first come in? Xin Ren once tried to interrogate those people, but those who were completely desperate were even more difficult to communicate with than lunatics, their language was chaotic, and they couldn't ask anything. Zhao Yutang took a sip of hot tea, his already delicate and gentle eyebrows and eyes blurred by the mist, giving off a hint of the softness of Jiangnan's misty rain. "I haven't visited your room yet. Have you packed your things?" Xin Ren never even went in, he has his own room. He tidied up very well, he said after all, she is a neat and loving person. Zhao Yutang didn't seem to catch his implied meaning. "Then I wish you a good dream tonight." "You too," Xin Ren said in a lower tone. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Happy Birthday, 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Happy Birthday, 7. Strictly speaking, this was the first day of Zhao Yutang's rebirth, and it was also an unsettling day. Her thoughts were complicated, and she only fell asleep in the latter half of the night. The curtains in the room were tightly drawn, and no trace of moonlight could penetrate. He walked in the deep night with a semi-transparent figure, his paper white face wrapped in fine black lines, creating a hint of eerie brilliance. He stopped by his own bed, where the damp and worn bedding had been replaced, and the broken flowers were soaked in the soft fragrance of a girl. Zhao Yutang fell asleep on his side, his hair slipping down and revealing the skin behind his ears. The dark red crescent seemed to be soaked in blood, breathtaking in beauty. Xin Ren stared at the crescent moon, his pitch-black pupils casting no shadow. He lowered his gaze and meticulously depicted the past with his cold fingertips, grinding his fingertips hard until he kneaded the crescent moon into a full moon. Seeing Zhao Yutang frowning in his sleep, He raised his eyebrows slightly and his fingertips lightly brushed over the sunken collarbone socket. Almost as soon as Xin Ran entered, Zhao Yutang noticed it. However, she was trapped in a nightmare and couldn't react at all. She frowned, and a cold breath wrapped around her ears, rubbing and twisting. She tightly bit her lips, trembling uncontrollably, and two bright reds flew at the end of her eyes. These anomalies were detected, and her breath grew even more profound. She tentatively climbed onto her lips and rubbed them with her fingertips. Zhao Yutang was well aware that there were frivolities and teasing in these actions, and she could even imagine the person's malicious and interested eyes. He treated himself as a doll without any respect. Is a ghost remarkable? She suddenly felt anger in her heart, struggling to break free from the shackles of the nightmare, fiercely closing the almost pried-open teeth, and opening her eyes at the same moment. In the room, there was only the sound of Lu Yuyu breathing while he was asleep, and that bad guy disappeared without a trace. However, his scorching ears and piercing lower lip were all promoting his good deeds. Zhao Yutang was really angry and laughed at now. She rubbed her ears hard, trying to dispel that unfamiliar feeling restless and restless. How can I leave from here following the usual routine of thrillers? They will soon find themselves trapped here, unable to contact the outside world, until they are teased to death. The system didn't beat around the bush and answered straightforwardly. The formation of the horror world depends entirely on the resentment of the villain, so the villain itself is the key to passing the level. This world follows Xin Ran's will to completely close and keep circulating. To escape here, one must first deal with him. Either influence or annihilate. However, the premise of both methods is that they can smoothly approach Shinran. Its previous hosts either did not listen to the command and only wanted to escape, or their poor acting skills led to a tragic end, and none of them could escape and survive smoothly. Persuade him. Zhao Yutang smiled faintly. The night breeze slowly blew, and Xin Ran sat on the balcony, his long legs swaying gently in the air. His gaze was blurred, and his pitch-black pupils seemed to devour everything. In fact, he was a bit confused, staring fixedly at his palm, where there seemed to still be the warm and soft touch of the girl's skin. He squinted his eyes and remembered the dark red crescent, which was very beautiful and as itchy as her lips. This was the first person who made him patiently wait. Perhaps it was because he had been bored for too long, or perhaps it was the provocation of that mysterious existence that made him want to explore carefully. Xin Ran looked forward to what Zhao Yutang would do next and when he could completely tear off his calm veil. The morning sun rose, and a vast expanse of rosy light spread across the earth, but it could not add any brightness to the young man's body. He was still dark and dusty, like the old photo hidden under the wardrobe for an unknown amount of time. Ah, it's the next day. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Happy Birthday, 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Happy Birthday, 8. As expected by Zhao Yutang, Lu Yuyu received a phone call from the company early in the morning saying that it was a vacation for the two of them. She had no suspicion at all, and even had no intention of going out. She planned to stay in her room for a whole day. However, seeing Zhao Yutang walking towards the living room, she still followed her, fearing that she would get in touch with Xin Ran when she was not around. There are many things in the living room, and at first glance, they are all old things. Even the clock is worn out and painted, and there are several cross-stitch paintings hanging on the wall, as well as an old-fashioned calendar. Tomorrow's date is circled, with two small characters written in red below. Birthday. The handwriting is very messy, probably hastily written, and the handwriting looks relatively new. Whose date? Is it the birthday of He Hongmei's deceased son? Hello. Xin Ran stood with his arms in his arms. What did you find? She always searches for these details, although being too calm makes him feel itchy. She is much stronger than those who cry crazily. Unexpectedly, Zhao Yutang answered him, look at this calendar. She looked at Xin Ran and earnestly discussed the clues with him. Whose birthday do you think this is? Xin Ran raised his eyebrows in surprise and quickly replied nonchalantly, anyway, it's not mine. He only has a Memorial Day and no birthday. Zhao Yutang seemed to have been amused by him, her eyebrows and eyes relaxed. She looked very beautiful when she smiled, and the classical beauty's expression had a peaceful feeling of time and tranquility. Xin Ran was stunned by this smile, and a hint of confusion appeared in his eyes. Why did she smile at him? She was already aware of the strangeness here and had a strong sense of vigilance towards him, but how could she still smile at him without any resentment? If it were those pretentious and insincere smiles, Xin Ran might just take action. He has always done this, but unfortunately her smile is shallow and incredibly real. He clenched his fist and released it, feeling a perplexed and indescribable tingling sensation in his heart. This unfamiliar feeling left him at a loss. Zhao Yutang had already turned his head. Today, she was tied in a ponytail, and the crescent-shaped marks on one side of her face were clearly visible. Xin Ran's gaze was firmly attached to her ear, as if it were connected to spider silk. He touched it there last night, and with just a little force, the moon turned full, which was very interesting. I also found a photo. Zhao Yutang completely ignored his direct gaze and said, look, I guess there are 4 people in this photo. One person is the son of the landlord's aunt, and who else could it be? Xin Ran was distracted by her smile and the crescent moon, and her expression was indifferent. Her daughter. Zhao Yutang shook his head and pointed to the bottom right corner of the photo, where there were a pair of light blue sneakers. These shoes are for men, maybe it's her other son, he said. Lu Yuyu, who had been listening to him for a while, couldn't help but interject, guess how many people there are and what they do. Is it related to you? Her tone was high and her words were not very pleasant, which was really annoying. Xin Ran, with impatience pressing his brows and eyes, suddenly handed her a glass of jelly. Zhao Yutang followed his hand and silently turned his head. That is her jelly, and I don't know when he stole it. There is absolutely no good intention in handing it to Lu Yuyu at this time. Lu Yuyu was flattered and took it over, and immediately opened it to eat. As soon as the cool jelly entered her mouth, a faint fishy smell filled her mouth, and the taste was sticky, as if she was chewing some fat. Her expression twisted, and she quickly ran to the bathroom to vomit, retching incessantly. Yutang Yutang. She stared at the toilet in terror, where the vomited out was not jelly at all, but red and black raw meat, with faintly visible white bones underneath. Lu Yuyu was almost scared and fainted. You look. Zhao Yutang glanced inside and saw that there was only a few bites of jelly in the toilet. She could probably guess what Lu Yuyu had thought of it as, patting her shoulder and saying, calm down, that's just jelly. Lu Yuyu was still in shock and gathered the courage to take another look. It was indeed jelly. She turned pale and said, what's going on? I saw it clearly. Zhao Yutang interrupted her, you should rest well, maybe you haven't slept well. Now Lu Yuyu can't play with her phone anymore. She's lying in bed with her heart pounding, unable to help but cover her head with a blanket. She's really scared. Zhao Yutang returned to the living room, and the old photo had been torn into pieces by Xin Ran that could no longer be pieced together. He even tore off a few calendars, but he did not move the one circled as his birthday. He is like a destructive child, seemingly unable to see these things in perfect condition. Is she okay? He pretended to care, but his expression was too lazy to conceal, completely lazy. Not very good, she also has hallucinations. Zhao Yutang sat down next to him, took a relatively intact calendar fold, and said, have you had any illusions? Xin Ran began to stare at her fingers, for example. For example. A ghost hand that rubs your ears, ah yes, and even touches your lips. Cough. Xin Ran turned her head and shamelessly said, no, I haven't had this kind of illusion. Zhao Yutang exclaimed, I think this may not be an illusion. She suddenly leaned in and the distance between the two was instantly narrowed, as her lips narrowly brushed against his chin due to the height difference. Xin Ran didn't move. He instinctively swallowed a few empty swallows, his thick long eyelashes hanging down, and his slightly opened lips hooked his mind. As soon as Zhao Yutang moved, he couldn't help but chase after him, persistent like a bee picking honey. Zhao Yutang didn't seem to notice his loss of composure. She spoke to herself with a smile in her voice, but her eyes were cold. You know, is there still a ghost, a pervert, in this room? Xin Ran regained consciousness and speculated in her heart whether she was deliberately saying these words to tease him, or whether she really didn't know he was okay. It must be the former. He lowered his voice, indicating something. Perhaps it's a demon. Zhao Yutang smiled and placed the folded paper crane in his palm. Perhaps, he said. She changed the topic and said, I haven't asked why you want to rent a house here yet. You still look like a student, don't you go to school? The 1,000 paper cranes made of stacked calendars were somewhat fancy. Xin Ran pinched his wings and looked at them repeatedly. No, we won't let them go at home. Why don't you go up? Xin Ran looked up and said, Are you trying to talk to me? He is quite familiar with this kind of cliché, but the other party is Zhao Yutang, and he is strangely not very angry. Zhao Yutang shook his head innocently and said, Have you never made friends before? This is the normal stage of understanding before making friends. If you have anything you want to know, you can ask me. She was right. Xin Ran did not have any experience in making friends, but he was very interested in the exchange of information she mentioned. She asked me to take care of her son, so she didn't let me go to school. He answered vaguely and quickly retorted, How many friends do you have? Zhao Yutang began to carefully recall that the pause was a bit long, and Xin Ran was not very happy. A lot. There aren't many, maybe 1 or 2, but we're not in touch now. Neither she nor the original owner seems to be very good at making friends. Your friend won't be the only one. As long as she thinks about it, she can't bear it. She wants to be unique. Xin Ran was barely satisfied with her answer and said generously, You can ask me another question. Zhao Yutang said seriously, Isn't today really your birthday? Staring at Qianzhai for a long time, Xin Ran finally made a sound. I'm only on my birthday. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Happy Birthday, 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Happy Birthday, 9. It's already summer, and the air is so sticky that it's hard to breathe. The ceiling fan hanging above my head creaks incessantly every time it rotates, which is even more annoying. Zhao Yutang, however, was not affected. She was so hot that her neck turned slightly red, and her expression remained calm. I'm not even a birthday, she said. Xin Ran, who had originally lowered his head, raised his eyes, feeling somewhat surprised. Why? She looked as if she would be well loved, but Xin Ran didn't want to empathize with her on this point. Inexplicably, he didn't want her to have anything in common with him. Zhao Yutang smiled lightly and said, Is it surprising? My childhood was not much better than yours. Childhood, that was an experience a long time ago, but now when I think about it, I actually remember each one clearly. The hot wind brushed her face, and she closed her eyes slightly. But I don't hate them. There's nothing to care about. Didn't I grow up well now? She is not talking about the original owner, but about the true one who died in a blizzard. In fact, it's not that she doesn't hate. Zhao Yutang just deliberately chose to forget. Being wrapped in resentment will seriously affect her life like a normal person, and she only wants to live calmly and normally. She looked at Xin Ran with a gentle and inclusive gaze, and you, do you have any hatred in your heart? Xin Ran remained silent, her silhouette gradually reflected in her pitch-black pupils. Hate, of course hate. If he didn't hate, how could he be trapped here and repeat that bloody and silent slaughter over and over again? But what does she mean by asking this? Did she intentionally approach him when she said these things to herself? It must be, Xin Ran knows she is such a cunning person, and the mysterious existence behind her may be giving her advice. It has to be said that the phrase, making friends, made him so tempted that he actually wanted to talk to her about those inner thoughts. So he spoke the truth candidly, I hate you very much. He may be born with less knowledge than others, unable to forget and forgive. When Zhao Yutang looked up, he noticed that he was looking straight at him. What's going on? Xin Ran is not a very patient person, he just asked directly if he wanted to know anything. Why are you here? He must confirm whether she will become his enemy, and what exactly does that mysterious existence want to do to him by sending people over and over again. On this hot noon, Zhao Yutang still broke out in a cold sweat and knew she couldn't lie. I didn't come voluntarily. She gave a bitter smile and said, the choices are limited. To some extent, what she said is indeed true. If there were other options, she would not have come to such an exciting place. She is a person who enjoys peace very much. She whispered, I just want to leave here. Just want to leave here. Yes, everything those people did was to escape, it was just too annoying for him. Xin Ran can almost be certain that her existence will not pose any threat to herself. She is just an ordinary person, even more fragile. That so-called mysterious existence is no exception. It is just an annoying fly to Xin Ran. Even if it has some skills, it won't change people frequently. He suddenly felt happy and couldn't explain why. Xin Ran is actually easy to understand. His emotions are almost undisguised. Zhao Yutang smiled slightly and said, are we friends now? It's interesting to say that this evil ghost is gloomy, cold, and impatient, but in terms of emotions, it's pure like a child, and actually bit her bait. Well, let me think about it. If it were in the past, Xin Ran would never have been interested in making friends. He was always indifferent and resistant to others, but now Xin Ran feels bored in this endless cycle of repetition. A person who knows the real him but doesn't feel afraid is a very novel existence for him. The electric fan made its final creaking sound and went completely out of action. The heat rushed towards him with open teeth and claws, and there was no sensation of burning. However, Zhao Yutang was extremely hot, using his hands to make the fan keep fanning. She touched her hot and flushed cheeks, but suddenly felt a gust of wind. Her drooping hair was blown up, and a cool breath seeped into her neck and back, making her squint comfortably. Zhao Yutang looked up unexpectedly, but only saw the young man's indifferent profile. She suddenly realized that being a demon also had its benefits. He was so cold on his body, like a mobile air conditioner. If it were really a mobile air conditioner, just unplug it and see how it messes up. With such a thought in mind, her eyes curved, and a clever and cunning smile quietly slipped out. Xin Ran caught a glimpse in the afterglow, and his fingertips resting on his knees moved, proudly curling his lips. His wind also has a significant effect. I didn't realize at all how incongruous and unproductive it was for this evil ghost to fan the girl with the wind. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Happy Birthday, 10. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 10 Happy Birthday, 10. He Hongmei only returned in the evening. She only cooked one dinner a day, which was exceptionally rich and still filled the table with meat dishes. Zhao Yutang, as usual, only ate vegetarian dishes, and Xin Ran ate less than her. He didn't touch the dishes that He Hongmei said her son loved the most. Zhao Yutang can be certain that Xin Ran is not the son of He Hongmei, he should be the person who was torn off in the photo. He previously said, she asked him to stay and take care of her son, which means that the deceased son was likely sick in advance. He Hongmei asked Xin Ran to take care of her son, so why did Xin Ran still not go to school after her son died? How did Xin Ran die? Did he die before or after that son? Zhao Yutang silently stroked her thoughts, even though she had successfully approached Xian Ran, she did not give up exploring what was happening in the family, while Lu Yuyu had not recovered from the morning's fright and had no appetite. She turned pale and quietly approached Zhao Yutang. "Does your phone have any signal?" Her voice was filled with tears. "I can't make phone calls or send messages online. Let's not stay here anymore. Let's leave tonight, okay?" Fearing that Zhao Yutang wouldn't want to, she hurriedly added, "I'll pay you. Let's go to the hotel together for one night first. I always feel like this place isn't quite right. After the morning incident, she has been very scared and always feels like she is being watched by something." Zhao Yutang refused softly, "We can't go out." Lu Yuyu didn't give up. As soon as Hongmei left, she pulled Zhao Yutang out and said, "How could it be impossible to leave? Let's go together." Halfway through, Zhao Yutang turned around and said, "Xian Ran, why don't you join in too?" Xian Ran raised an eyebrow unexpectedly and said, "Okay. This old-fashioned community has low floors, no elevators, and still follows traditional stairs. The spacious hallway echoes with every step taken." The room they rented was on the 5th floor, but after walking up the stairs for more than 10 minutes, they still couldn't reach the 1st floor. Lu Yuyu finally realized what Zhao Yutang meant and was trembling uncontrollably. "What should we do? I don't want to die, there must be ghosts here." She shouldn't have been greedy for cheap things. This is such a haunted house that has died before. At this time, Lu Yuyu could no longer care about anything else and instinctively relied on this always calm colleague and roommate. Zhao Yutang held her hand to calm her down, and Xian Ran was already impatient with her noise. "You can't get out by walking, but there must be other ways to get out." She looked at Xian Ran and said, "Isn't that right?" There was still 1,000 paper cranes she had folded in her chest pocket, and Xian Ran met her clear apricot eyes, feeling the need and trust, and nodded slightly. "Of course. Of course, there are other ways to go out, but it depends on whether he is willing or not." Zhao Yutang smiled at him and confirmed again, "Are we friends now?" For some reason, Xian Ran's heart was burning hot, and the strange feeling excited him as never before. Why does he feel his heart beating faster even though he no longer has a heart? He hardly thought and said the answer he had already confirmed. Of course. She is his friend now. She is his. He wants to keep her. Xian Ran was extremely confident that he was about to possess her, and he would treat her as an interesting companion to experience the cycle of death that would continue. She would be a mediator for his boring life. At this moment, Zhao Yutang lowered his head and his emotions were completely indifferent to his expression. "Can ghosts also die?" the system happily replied, "Ghosts will die and disappear." "Has the host already figured out what to do?" Zhao Yutang murmured softly, as if repeating Xian Ran's words, "Of course. Persuade him." She never pinned her hopes on others. End of this chapter.